Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into something that I think affects us all. It's the fear of failure. We're going to be using excerpts from Overcoming Fear of Failure, How to Build Resilience.
Ooh, that sounds interesting.
Yeah, and hopefully by the end we can all kind of understand, why we fear failure, how it can impact our lives, and most importantly, how we can move past it. Think of this deep dive as a way to turn those setbacks into stepping stones.
I like that. Yeah, stepping stone.
Yeah, I like that visual too.
It's interesting because this fear, I think it's so common, but we don't really talk about it. So we often feel like we're the only ones going through it, you know?
Yeah, it can feel very isolating. So to kick things off, let's get personal for a second and just think back to a time when you really felt that fear of failure, that nervous energy, the doubt creeping in. What do you think was at the root of it for you? I mean,
Well, I think for me, it was a lot of the things this material talks about, societal pressure, Like we're constantly being bombarded with messages about success being everything, which makes failure seem almost taboo, you know?
yeah, it's like we're taught to avoid failure at all costs. And we don't see it as a learning experience. But isn't failure just a natural part of life? I mean, it has to be, right?
It absolutely is, but we have this success at all costs mentality, and that doesn't really leave a lot of room for the fact that failure is actually how we learn and grow. It's feedback, not a full stop, right?
Right, yeah.
Like think about Thomas Edison and his 10,000 attempts to create the light bulb, right?
Yeah, he kept trying, didn't he?
Exactly. Those weren't failures. They were steps towards success.
Okay, that makes sense. But even if we logically understand that, failure is part of the process, it can still feel really discouraging when it actually happens to us.
Of course, yeah. Because that's where the fear of judgment comes in. We start to worry about what other people will think, about being seen as incompetent or like foolish if we don't succeed on the first try. And that fear can be paralyzing.
Yeah, I think for me, I've definitely held myself back from doing things because I was worried about what people would think if I messed up. And then there's that whole perfectionism thing, It's almost like if I can't guarantee you'll be perfect, I'd rather not even try.
Oh, I totally get that. I struggle with that too. And the source material actually talks about that a lot, that, perfectionism can set us up for a lot of unnecessary stress and anxiety.
Right.
Yeah, and it's important to remember that progress is more important than perfection, especially when it comes to overcoming this fear of failure.
I think a lot of us can relate to that. But let's shift gears a bit. So this source material spends a lot of time talking about, discussing how detrimental this fear of failure can be. So what are some of the ways it can actually hold us back?
Well, the impact of this fear can be significant. Think of all the things you might try if you weren't so afraid to fail.
Yeah. What would you try?
Right. Like maybe it's applying for a dream job, right? Or starting a creative project, or even taking a risk in your personal life. Fear can actually prevent us from even pursuing those opportunities at all.
It's like we're trading potential for comfort. And that can be a pretty costly trade in the long run, right?
Yeah.
It's not just about the missed opportunities, though. There's also the mental and emotional toll that the fear of failure can take. What do you think about that?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Constantly worrying about failure, well, that can lead to things like chronic procrastination, low self-esteem, and even a feeling of being, being stuck in a rut. Fear can drain our energy and make it really hard to enjoy life fully.
Okay, so we've talked about some of the root causes of this fear, and we've touched on how it can impact us. But enough with the doom and gloom. Let's dive into solutions. What are some practical strategies that we can use to actually, overcome this fear of failure and start building resilience?
Well, I'm glad you asked because the source material actually lays out a really helpful framework for tackling this. One of the first things it suggests is reframing how we actually view failure altogether. So instead of seeing it as this negative judgment on our worth, what if we saw it as feedback?
Oh, that's a good point. So it's almost like shifting our perspective. Instead of like thinking I'm a failure, we can ask ourselves, okay, that didn't work out as planned, but what can I learn from this?
Exactly. It's about recognizing that every experience, even the ones that we label as failures, well, they all have the potential to teach us something valuable. And those lessons, well, those can actually bring us closer to our goals.
Yeah, that's a really helpful way to look at it. But what about those times when the fear of failure is so intense that it feels paralyzing. I know I've personally struggled with feeling frozen by that fear.
Oh yeah, me too. Definitely. That's completely understandable because fear can be incredibly powerful, especially when it's rooted in those past experiences. One strategy the source material recommends is it's to start small, so taking like baby steps. And those can help us build confidence and slowly chip away at that fear.
So instead of like diving headfirst into a huge challenge, we can just start by taking smaller, more manageable risks.
Exactly. Even something as simple as, as trying a new recipe or speaking up in a meeting or even just signing up for a class. All those can be great ways to step outside of your comfort zone and build resilience.
I love that. It's almost like proving to ourselves that we can handle challenges, even if they don't go perfectly. So those small wins that can help build our confidence over time.
Absolutely. And another strategy that ties into this is focusing on the process, not just the outcome. So instead of fixating on just achieving a specific goal, what if we shifted our attention to enjoying the journey and celebrating every step forward?
That's a really interesting point. I feel like we often put so much pressure on ourselves to reach that end goal that we forget to appreciate the learning and growth that happens along the way.
That's true. And that shift in focus from outcome to process, well, that can actually help reduce our fear of failure because if we're enjoying the process, even the setbacks become less daunting.
That's a great way to put it. So by reframing failure as feedback and taking those baby steps and focusing on the process rather than just the outcome, then we can start to build our resilience and reduce the power that fear has over us. But what about those deep-seated beliefs that we hold about ourselves? How do we address those?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's where the concept of a growth mindset comes in. And it's something the source material emphasizes quite a bit. Having a growth mindset means believing that our abilities can actually be developed through, effort and practice. So instead of seeing our talents and intelligence as fixed, we embrace the idea that we can always learn, grow, and improve.
So instead of saying things like, I'm not good at this, or I'll never be able to do that, we can reframe our thinking to something like, I'm still learning, or I'm working on developing this skill.
Exactly. And that shift in self-talk, that can make a huge difference in how we approach challenges and setbacks. Because instead of seeing failure as a reflection of our inherent limitations, we view it as an opportunity for growth.
That's a much more empowering way to look at it. I'm starting to see how all of these strategies connect and build upon each other, but I'm curious, in addition to just reframing our thinking, are there any other practical tools or techniques we can use to manage that fear of failure?
Oh, there are. And the source material actually dives into a few that I think are particularly helpful. One is the concept of self-compassion. We often judge ourselves so harshly when we make mistakes, but we wouldn't treat a friend that way, would we?
No, of course not. I mean, if a friend was struggling with a setback, I would offer support, encouragement, and remind them of their strengths.
Exactly. And that's the same kind of compassion we need to extend to ourselves. Instead of that, harsh inner critic, cultivate an inner cheerleader.
I love that, yeah. So it's about replacing self-judgment with self-support, especially during those tough times. What else can we add to our resilience toolkit?
Well, this next one might surprise you. Visualization.
Wait, you mean like picturing ourselves succeeding? Isn't that a little out there?
It might sound that way, but there's actually quite a bit of research supporting the power of visualization. By spending even just a few minutes each day visualizing ourselves successfully navigating those challenging situations, we can reduce anxiety and build confidence.
I've heard about athletes using visualization techniques to improve their performance. Could you explain a little bit more about how this works?
Yeah, so essentially visualization is like creating a mental rehearsal for real life situations, but repeatedly imagining ourselves handling challenges effectively. Well, we're training our minds to actually focus on the possibility of success.
So instead of dwelling on those "what if I fail" thoughts, we're intentionally shifting our focus to "what if I succeed" scenarios.
Precisely. It's about rewiring our brains to be less fearful and more confident.
Okay, I'm definitely intrigued by this visualization technique. I'm starting to see how these seemingly small mindset shifts can have a big impact on how we approach challenges.
They absolutely can, and it's important to remember that these strategies work best when they're when they're practiced consistently. It's like building any other muscle. The more we use it, the stronger it becomes.
That makes sense. It's not about It's not about achieving overnight perfection. It's about cultivating these resilience building habits over time.
You've got it. And with that, I think it's time for a quick break. When we come back, we'll explore some more strategies from the source material and discuss how to put these ideas into action. So stay tuned.
Welcome back. We've been talking about some really powerful strategies for overcoming the fear of failure, like reframing it as feedback and building a growth mindset. But there's still so much to unpack.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing that really struck me in the source material was the emphasis on the importance of self-compassion.
That makes sense. We've touched on how harshly we can judge ourselves when we make mistakes. It can be tough to, offer ourselves that same kindness and understanding that we might give to a friend.
It really is. Think about it. If a friend came to you feeling discouraged after a setback, you wouldn't berate them. You wouldn't call them a failure, right? You'd offer support and encouragement and remind them of their strengths.
Absolutely. I try to help them see the situation in a more balanced and compassionate way. But I'll admit, I don't always extend that same courtesy to myself.
You're not alone in that. It's a practice. Like any other resilience building technique, the source material actually suggests some specific steps for cultivating more self-compassion. One is to simply notice those negative self-talk patterns when they arise. Just becoming aware of those harsh judgments. Well, that can be a powerful first step.
So instead of letting those thoughts run wild, we can pause and acknowledge them without getting swept away by them. That sounds helpful.
It is. And then once you've noticed that inner critic, try to challenge those negative thoughts. Ask yourself, is this really true, or would I say this to a friend? Often those harsh judgments, well, they aren't based in reality.
That's a great point. It's so easy to get caught up in those self-critical spirals, but stepping back and questioning those thoughts can help us break free from them.
Exactly. And finally, try to reframe those negative thoughts with more compassionate and supportive language. Instead of "I messed up," you might say, "Everyone makes mistakes. What can I learn from this?"
It sounds like it's about shifting from self-criticism to self-encouragement.
Precisely. And that can make a world of difference in how we navigate challenges and setbacks.
I'm really appreciating the emphasis on self-compassion. It's so easy to overlook the importance of being kind to ourselves, especially when we're striving for success.
It is. And speaking of striving for success, the source material also touches on a strategy that might seem a little unconventional: visualization.
Visualization, as in picturing ourselves succeeding. I'm curious to learn more about that.
It might sound a bit woo-woo at first, but there's actually a lot of research backing up the power of visualization. By spending even just a few minutes each day visualizing ourselves, navigating challenging situations effectively and achieving our goals, well, we can reduce anxiety and build confidence.
It sounds almost like mental rehearsal for real life situations, like athletes visualizing themselves winning a race.
You got it. And just like athletes use visualization to improve their performance, well, we can use it to overcome our fear of failure by repeatedly imagining ourselves handling challenges effectively. We're training our minds to focus on the possibility of success rather than getting stuck in, those "what if I fail" scenarios.
So instead of letting our minds run wild with those anxious "what if" thoughts, we're intentionally choosing to focus on more positive and empowering images.
Exactly. It's about consciously shaping our thoughts and beliefs to support our goals.
This is fascinating. I can see how visualization could be a really valuable tool, especially when combined with some of the other strategies we've talked about, like reframing failure and practicing self-compassion.
Absolutely. They all work together to create a more, resilient and confident mindset. And speaking of resilience, the source material spends a considerable amount of time discussing the idea of taking action despite fear.
That makes sense. We can talk about reframing failure and building confidence all day long, but at some point we actually have to put those ideas into action. But how do we do that when the fear is so intense that it feels paralyzing?
That's a great question, and it's where the courage to act despite fear comes in. The truth is, fear may never fully go away, but the source material emphasizes that courage isn't about the absence of fear. It's about acting even when we're afraid.
So instead of waiting for the fear to magically disappear, we acknowledge it, accept that it's there, and choose to move forward anyway.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that fear is a natural human emotion, but it doesn't have to dictate our choices or prevent us from pursuing the things that matter to us.
That's a powerful reframe. We often get stuck thinking that we need to feel completely fearless before we can take action. But what you're saying is that it's more about learning to act alongside fear.
Exactly. And the more we practice doing that, the easier it becomes. Think of it like building a muscle. The more we exercise that courage muscle, well, the stronger it gets.
That's it. That's a great analogy. I'm starting to see fear less as an enemy and more as a challenge that we can learn to manage and even use to our advantage.
I'm glad to hear that. It's a real shift in perspective, and it can be incredibly liberating.
It really can. I feel like we've covered so much ground already, but I'm eager to hear more about what the source material suggests for actually putting these ideas into practice.
There's plenty more to discuss, and when we come back, we'll delve into the power of learning from others, embracing imperfection, and celebrating our progress along the way.
Wow, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, haven't we? From reframing failure to practicing self-compassion, and even that visualization has been really insightful. But I think it's time to bring it all home for our listeners.
Yeah, I agree. We've explored a lot of different strategies, but the question is, how do we actually apply these ideas,
Right.
in our daily lives?
Exactly. So for our listeners who are ready to take that next step, what's the one thing they should remember when that fear of failure starts to creep in? What's the key takeaway from all of this?
That's a good question. If there's one thing I hope listeners take away from this deep dive, it's that failure isn't the opposite of success. It's part of it. It's through our setbacks and our mistakes and, yes, even our failures that we learn and grow and ultimately achieve our goals.
It's like that saying, every master was once a disaster.
Exactly. And when we embrace that perspective, when we shift our mindset from fear to curiosity, well, we can transform those so-called failures into valuable learning experiences. The source material really emphasizes this idea of viewing challenges as opportunities for growth.
It's about turning those stumbling blocks into stepping stones.
Right.
Instead of letting fear hold us back, we can use it as fuel to propel us forward.
I like how you put that. And it's a journey, not a destination. There will be ups and downs, twists and turns along the way. But with each step we take, we build resilience, confidence, and a deeper understanding of ourselves.
This deep dive has been so eye-opening for me. I feel like I have a whole new perspective on failure.
Yeah.
And a renewed sense of determination to pursue my goals, fears, and all that.
That's wonderful to hear. And remember, you're not alone in this journey. We all face setbacks. We all experience fear. But by embracing these strategies, by supporting each other, we can transform that fear into fuel for growth and create a world where failure is seen not as a taboo, but as an essential part of the human experience.
That's beautifully said. So, for our listeners out there who are ready to embrace the messy, imperfect, and ultimately rewarding journey of growth, what's one action they can take today to start putting these strategies into practice?
I encourage them to start by reflecting on their own relationship with failure. What are some of the beliefs or fears that are holding them back? Once they've identified those, well, then they can choose one strategy from this deep dive, whether it's reframing failure, practicing self-compassion, or visualizing success, and commit to trying it out this week.
Yeah, that's a great starting point. And remember, even small steps can lead to big changes. It's about progress, not perfection.
Yeah, absolutely. So go out there, embrace the challenges, and don't let fear hold you back from reaching your full potential.
You are capable and resilient and worthy of achieving your dreams. And remember, even if you stumble, you can always get back up, dust yourself off, and keep moving forward.
Until next time, keep diving deep and keep exploring the boundless possibilities within yourself and the world around you.
See you on our next deep dive.